Hello, this is David Ruff calling, and I'm telling you that there is a problem coming, you guys, and I want you to pay attention to this. The Federal Reserve in the United States has raised their interest rate again, and this is going to cause a lot more pain for you. Now, you guys know that I live in Canada, but what on earth does U.S. debt have anything to do with you? And what do the rates have to do with you? Well, Canada follows suit. 90% of the time, we do exactly what the US does, but we're always in the same direction. What happens to the United States economy always comes for the rest of the world. So that one guy that leads the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, Big Papa Powell, I call him, when he does something, the rest of the world is going to react and have something that happens to them. So we have to pay attention. And boy, oh boy, did he have some doozies in it today. So we're going to be covering the Fed minutes, what happened today, how we can use that information for our own benefit, and how we can use it to make money. Because at the end of the day, all we want to do is make sure that you and your family are going to not just survive, but to thrive this coming big time of heartache. All right, you guys, let's jump straight into the meeting and what Papa Powell talked about earlier today. You guys, let's grab and pick up our story on the first article. The first article we're going to be bringing up, if you just type in Fed minutes into any browser that you want, you're going to come up with the press release. So we're going to go through the press release, and then I'm going to show you where you can get the link for that. So today, the Federal Reserve of the United States, they said that job gains have been robust in recent months and unemployment rate has remained low. They said this in the second sentence. Why they bring this up? Why they bring this up and that this is important, that it's in the second sentence, is because it is stubbornly high. They don't want this many people working. If you go back and read previous minutes, they're saying they want higher unemployment, even though their mandate is to have a stable currency and to have maximum employment. You can't have both in this situation. So they are willing to sacrifice the unemployment in order to maintain their dollar supremacy and to get price stability back to 2%. So it's very, very interesting that this is their choice of the second sentence to put in the press minutes. Now, it says also that they reflected supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic. This is very, very important as well, in my opinion. You guys, the difference between supply and demand is the rule for economies that have happened for a millennia, since the beginning of time. So if we look into that, you guys, if the price of apples is too expensive and it gets very high, what would happen? If an apple was $5, let's say, well, a lot of growers would go, maybe I can make some money doing this. They're going to go plant some trees, get a vineyard or an apple orchard, whatever it is going to be. They're going to grow more of the stuff and then sell more of the stuff and bring the price down, right? So the supply and demand always holds true for anything, ever. But here is the thing. The U.S. doesn't make anything. Canada doesn't make a lot of stuff. We import everything. So the only thing that the governments could do is to push down demand. And if you go watch his live, he actually mentions that they are trying to bring down demand. So what does bring down demand actually mean? They use a lot of jargon, right? So bringing down demand is making it too expensive for you to even be able to purchase. Say you make $4,000 a month, you pay $2,000 in taxes, and it's $2,000 rent. You have no money left to buy even food. So you're going to really cut back on everything that you buy. If that was the case, then, they're going to say, well, that's good because inflation has cooled down. So remember that supply and demand run everything. The real reason, the way for us to get the prices down was to increase supply. This doesn't matter if we're talking about gas, homes, food. It doesn't really matter. Okay, let's jump straight back into that article, you guys. And just type in Fed minutes. That's what we're referring to today. So if we continue down, I have another couple highlighted areas you could read along with me. The committee seeks to achieve maximum employment. I don't believe that because they said that employment was stubbornly high. and they want to get inflation rate to 2% over the longer run, which you and I know that that's near impossible for them to do. The committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the target range will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive. Now, you're going to hear that word over and over and over again, restrictive, but do you see it says ongoing increases? So they have been extremely clear about this, that this is not over. They were going to keep raising rates every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, whatever it's going to be. They're going to keep on raising rates nonstop until they get what they want. Until they get what they want, which is 2%. So how high would it have to go? Now, historically, the rate would have to be 2% higher than inflation. So if inflation was running at 8% like it is today, we would need 10% interest rate. Now, if you are looking around and seeing the carnage that has happened so far with a 5% rate or a 4% rate, imagine what will actually happen. Imagine if it was at 10. It would be unbelievable. Now, they keep on mentioning this word restrictive. What does restrictive mean? Restrictive means taking all the money out of the taxpayer's pocket in order to fund the government, right? So you guys, we have to pay attention to this, because this is going to be deciding how much money of your paycheck you're going to get to keep. It also says the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags of which monetary policy affects the economic activity. So what that means is it takes time. Once they raise the rates, it takes time for the effects to actually show up. That's really, really important for us to understand the way that the economy works. Imagine having a very, very large ship with a tiny little rudder on the back. When that rudder changes, it takes a long time for the boat to eventually turn. The economy is that way, and that rudder is like the interest rate. The economy is heading this direction, all that inertia, they just move that little rudder off to the side, and it takes time for that boat to swing around. This is how the interest rate works. So once it gets swinging, right, they have to be careful not to go too fast, is what they always say. But, it remains to be seen. We're seeing a lot of damage right now. The committee will continue reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agent debt and agency mortgage-backed securities. So do you know what that means by them reducing their holdings? Reducing their holdings is like, as they're getting that money coming in from the higher interest rate, they're able to unload some of their other things as well. They call it quantitative tightening. So they're going to be getting rid of some of the money supply out there to try to tackle some of this inflation. But they're taking some of your money in order to be able to do that. Yes, I think that was all my notes that I had on that article. So thank you very much for going along with me on that one. So as we continue, I wanted to show you another couple of things. I had a couple of things I wanted to show you. If you go to YouTube, you can go to YouTube, and then on YouTube, you can actually watch exactly what we're talking about here. I wanted you to see what the title was. Okay, so if we go on to YouTube, here we go. This is where you can go see it live. It's called Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell expected to announce interest rate hike today. But if you go here, it has his full 12-minute speech, and then he goes and answers a lot of questions. So if we go and look at some of his questions that are answered here, he makes some interesting comments if you go through everything that he was talking about. Now, here is my notes on it. We went into a health crisis in 2020. We had to print a lot of money. But did we have to print a lot of money? I don't know. That remains to be seen. Remember, this channel is not either left, right, blue, red, liberal, conservative. Doesn't matter. We are for the side of people who are opening small businesses. We're open for the side of free market capitalism. And we want everybody to have a chance to do well and have a chance at upward mobility. So this isn't left, right policy, but did they need to print so much money? They did. So this is the problem they're in. Now that they printed all that money, now it's time to pay off that credit card. You know, when people go crazy at Christmas time and go spend too much money, they get the bill in January, February, and they're like horrified, and now they have to go pay it all off. We were living like a drunken sailor, and then we spent a lot for a short amount of time, and now the bill is due, and their job is to come and get that money. Why does this matter to you? This matters to you because when you go and make a salary and you go out and work, it's not up to you how much money of that you get to keep. The government comes in and makes a decision like Harry Potter's wand and decides how much money they're going to take. It's up to them. They decide how much of your salary you're going to take. They decide how much of your investments they're going to take. They decide. Remember, the government doesn't make any money. They don't make anything. So all their money comes from taking it from other people. So now is their job to go and get money from other people because they have too much debt. And we're seeing that happening out right now. This is why you have to pay attention to it. So here is some of the jargon that kind of always mixes me up back and forth. I hear different words. Okay, so they mention entrenched inflation. Now they talk about this as if everybody knows what that means. What does entrenched inflation mean? This is where I don't like it, that the finger is pointing at me. It was the government that decided to print all of this money for whatever political gain or whatever reasons they want to do. They printed the money, and now they have to get it back. But they will go and mention this entrenched inflation because this is the idea. It's human psychology, the buyer's psychology. So if you and I go to the store in the summertime and bought something, give me something, a can of spaghetti for $3, and then we go in the fall and it's $4, we're like, oh my goodness, it's going to be $6 next year, so I'm going to buy an extra can. That is entrenched inflation because we have the expectation that prices will continue to go up, so it makes us pull spending forward. So they blame sometimes entrenched inflation, meaning us believing that inflation is the thing. Remember when they were saying inflation is transitory? Inflation is transitory. It's not here. Don't worry about it. But it actually was here. So they are trying to get you to push off your spending now when they're talking about entrenched. Now, what is structural inflation? They always talk about that. Structural inflation is the inflation by design. And the government talks about they want to get it back to 2% inflation because that is where they make that extra 2% of tax off you every single year. Now, you guys know, if you follow like shadow stats or anything, real inflation is always sitting at 4, 5, 6%, even though they claim it's only 2. Whereas today's inflation, they're stating it's only 8%, but in reality, it's probably closer to 15 or 16. And anyone who goes to the grocery store can attest that the food has not gone up just 8%. So this entrenched and structural inflation, it's important for us to know what the definitions of those two, because they use a lot of jargon. Number 2, always remember that high interest is going to equal high inflation. It's going to somewhere, but it depends where, and we're going to talk about that soon. Also, when they were answering questions, they talk about wage spiral. Did you ever hear that word, wage spiral? So that means that as the cost of living goes up and your salary does not, you're going to go put some pressure on your boss, say, I need a raise because my rent has gone up, my gas has gone up, my food has gone up, I need more money. And then you get more money. And then with that more money, you still go buy the food and whatever else you need. And when you go buy it, that's adding to inflation. So when the Fed is actually talking about wage spiral, they are wanting all of us consumers not to go to our bosses to ask for an increase. They actually need higher unemployment. But just to say that there is high unemployment and it's posing a problem, think about what that sentence means. That means that they need millions of people to lose their jobs and millions of companies to go under to control inflation. That's demand inflation. If all these people don't have a job, they have no money to buy anything. Whereas the other way to get prices down would be to produce a lot of stuff, whatever things that people need. Produce more stuff and the prices can come down. So you can only focus usually on one of them. And usually they call it supply side economics, make more stuff, or demand side economics, which is make an apple, $200 an apple, and then it'll be so expensive no one will ever buy it. That demand side crushing has never made sense. I want to know what you know. If you want to let me know in the comments below. Also, they keep on mentioning that high employment being a problem. And so I want you to work through that in your mind. Now, what happens when there is high amount of debt? Now, there is two types, right? We always look at M2 money supply, but at the end of the day, inflation is going to come to your face whether you like it or not. So during 2007, 8, 9, all the trouble, that all these bailouts to governments, government offices, banks, all kinds of stuff. So the government printed money and gave it to the banks. Now, we didn't see it, right? But it increases the money supply and increases stocks everywhere, and people's wealth goes up. Inversely, if they took all that money instead of giving it to banks like they did in 08, now they sent it to everybody and individual businesses. So now it gets out into the market faster. Inflation will show up faster. But either way, whether they're paying it behind to the big corporations or they're paying it directly, inflation is going to happen because a lot more money is in the system. So let's take a look at a couple of our debts. I wanted to show you that. So if you take your time and just go to a website called US Debt Clock, and then we're going to look at the Canadian debt clock. The US Debt Clock, it's usdebtclock.org if you want to go check out that website. Right at the very top, it talks about US national debt right at the very top. $31 trillion, 31 with a T. They're spending $1 trillion every 9 months. So 31 trillion, but please don't think that is where it stops. We have to continue on. A little bit to the center of the page, you'll see state debt sitting at 1.2 trillion, a local debt 2.2 trillion. We got to keep on adding all these trillions to it, right? In addition, if you go down to the bottom, unfunded liabilities is sitting at $172 trillion. Now add all of that up. We're talking about numbers that could like buy Earth. If aliens came down to Earth and said, "Hey guys, how much for this beautiful marble you have here?" It's massive amount of money. This is the problem that we're facing. Now, we're going to also pay attention to this other line on US Debt Clock, US federal tax revenue. So this is how much money that they're making. Okay, 5 a year, but they owe a couple hundred. Now, if we took that and just take it back to me and you, like regular people, if me and you owed $200, but we only made $5 a year, how fast do you think you could pay that off? Never. I need that $5 to survive, right? So the US government is making $5 trillion a year, but they owe a couple $100 trillion on the other side. And all of those, the costs are going up and up and up. This is an issue. So if you go back and take a look at this debt clock, this problem is not going anywhere. But here's what I mean is even the current debt, 31 trillion here, another trillion for states, another 2.2 for local debt. You add all of that up. Imagine we were sitting at a 10% interest rate. You're now sitting at 35 trillion. 10% is 3.5 trillion. Their total revenue is only 5. Do you see where that problem would be? So in order just to pay the interest on their debt, just to pay their interest, they would have to take $3.5 trillion of their 4.9. $3.5 trillion to pay for debt. Just the interest. Think about that. That means that you would have to cut your police by 60%, fire by 60%, government by 60%, every welfare payment by 60%, every department, Homeland Security, border service, everything could be cut back by 60%. That can't happen. So my point of saying that is I strongly suggest and believe that inflation is going to continue around 5 or 10% for the next several years. Now, is this the first time we've ever seen this? Is a good question. No. After 1945, we had massive problems, right? The government had, all governments of the world had went to war. They needed money to be able to get out of debt because they had to go to a war, obviously. And they invented a lot of money. They printed it. Here's the funny thing. When you and I go and make false money and print it on a photocopier in our basement, that's called counterfeiting. And you go to jail for the rest of your life for that. But when a government does it, it's called policy. Very different wording, right? So they just invent the money out of nowhere. But who does inflation really help? people with high debt. And nobody has more debt than a government. So the government loves to have some inflation. 1945, it got down their debt to GDP a lot. Happened again in the 70s, and it's happening again right now. So we have to remember where that debt is. Now, if we continue on, you guys, on that same thing, you guys know that I live in Canada. Now, if we go and take a look at Canada's national debt clock, we are sitting, I'm in Ontario, $469 billion, highest non-federal debt on earth. Congratulations, Ontario. If we go and look at the Canadian debt clock, let's go look at Canada's debt clock. Canadian debt clock, we're not as bad as the United States, guys, but we are a lot smaller than the United States. If we take a look at our debt clock, we're sitting over $1 trillion now for the first time in our history. It's taking a second to come up here. I think it's 1.2 trillion is where we're at right now. Our debt goes up. It looks like a small amount compared to the United States, but we're at 1.2 trillion right now. Now, this doesn't stop there. Even if you come back and look at the city of Toronto, the city of Toronto is in massive deficits. Here we are, $857 million deficit this year. That's not talking about total debt. Of course, the debt is in the many, many billions of dollars. But just this year, they're going to be down almost $1 billion just this year. So it's at every level. There's people have debt, families have debt, the municipalities have debt, the cities have debt, the provinces or states have debt, the federals, like the national debts are massive. The entire system is built on debt. Now, here is the problem. We did a video last week on the top 56 countries. There's only been 56 countries in the last 200 years that tipped past 130% debt to GDP. So that debt to GDP is where we're at right now. We have had monstrous rate growth in our debt. So now that it's so big, we cannot afford the interest on that debt. 55 of the 56 countries that hit 130% have ceased to exist, absolutely imploded. So this is the danger that we're in. It's very, very imminent. But here's the funny thing. Canada, United States, people, countries never go bankrupt if their debt is denominated in their own dollars. So imagine if they were in more debt, Canada or the United States, all they're going to do if they needed money is turn on the printing press and print some more. So that debt is most likely going to become less and less valuable. That is why you should plan for yourself to be in an environment of higher inflation over the next several years. If it is, you will have prepared. That's great. If it's not, you're still going to be better off either way. So this is why we got to look ahead, see where we're heading, see the road where we're heading for. There's going to be some tough times. So if they're going to continue to raise interest rates, remember, whatever happens in the US happens in Canada, happens in the United States, happens in Europe. So once this has happened, we have the benefit of a 6-week lag before it happens in Canada when we see it happening in the United States. So we got to take this time to reassess where we're sitting. So if we can get through this next season, we're going to be very good. Remember, for hundreds and thousands of years, there is recessions that happen every 5 to 7 years. So this is normal. And every 5 to 7 years, it wipes out those people who were over leveraged and didn't spend their money on productive things and just use it to buy fun purses, fancy cars. So this is where me and you are going to be able to do really, really well. The best businesses are built during a recession. This interest rate, they have stated over and over again, it's going to continue higher and higher and higher. And now it's looking like they're going to raise it a lot more than we expected and for a lot longer than we expected. So adjust your home buying strategies accordingly, because there's going to be a lot of rent increase, but there's also going to be a lot of home decrease in prices. Remember, earlier in the year, some of our clients were getting an $800,000 mortgage, and today they can only get $350,000 mortgage. That is a massive, massive drop, more than 50%. So those people are going to be completely out of the market being able to purchase right now, but it takes time for the home prices to drop. It could take up to 18 months. All right, you guys, I'm always here for your health, wealth, and happiness. If there's anything that I can do, please send me a message. Please remember to like and subscribe to this. Hope it gave you some value, and I'll talk to you on the next video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you like that video, you might like this one and maybe something like that.